Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with shamanic spiritual coach and teacher Martin Theus. He focuses on mental and emotional well-being through the art of shamanic journeys. His greatest strength can be found in the field of communication with highly developed emotional intelligence. His coaching practice, Light Trails, serves men in executive positions to assist them in bringing well-being into their professional and social lives. He originally wanted to be a comedian, but things changed quite a bit. We cover a lot of ground. Enjoy this interview.
Well, hey, Mark, I'm glad we could connect. Thank you for taking a minute out today. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
You bet. So before we get into your life here, I want to kind of cover what we've lived through for the last couple of years with this pandemic. I'm curious how you survived that time period and how it subsequently changed the way that not only you live your life, but the way that you conduct business.
So I saw a really interesting display at a church online. I didn't see the church, but it was when COVID ends, you're either a monk, a hunk, a drunk, or a chunk, I think. And how this applies to me, I was really meditating a lot, and I had been before, but because I was at home and was still working, my job continued because I was taking care of a person with a disability at the time. I was still in my regular mode, but just meditating a little more, I would say, and listening to Eckhart Tolle and other spiritual teachers for some guidance. And that is basically how I came out of the pandemic and turned this back into my business, or reverted it back into the business, that newfound spiritual, just like content, I would say.
Well, I think the interesting thing about what you're doing is that a lot of people were seeking and digging within, and I think spirituality is a big part of that. Have you seen an uptick in business and what you're doing and kind of a thirst from people that are looking for fulfillment?
Yeah, I would say something like the disturbing element. COVID has been this disturbing element where people were forced to just do things differently. They couldn't consume the things they consumed. Partying wasn't available. Drinking maybe not as much. And so I think it just turned into a little bit of chaos, and people are just like trying out things and are looking, and some are turning to spirituality. Others are just maybe more into sports, gardening, handcrafts. And so I feel like people are just shifting and trying things out, and are kind of like shaken out of these habitual patterns that they used to have. And yes, as you mentioned, some people are more interested in personal fulfillment. What is my purpose? What am I doing here? How can I serve? And so I feel that is definitely a conversation that is easier now than it was before.
So to get to the essence of what you do for a living, I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of grade school kids, third graders. You're at a career day, and one of the kids looks up at you and says, "What do you do for a living, and how are you qualified?" How would you answer them?
So what I do for a living is, even though it sounds simple enough, is serving others, and that can have many, many different faces, or in different situations I'm doing different things. And yet it is the question that I ask myself the most, is how may I serve in this situation? What is it that is needed right here? And in my coaching practice, that is a little bit more maybe teaching based, or people have a certain intention, a goal that they come to me with, and then we're working on that, and I'm serving through that. But in the everyday life, I'm still asking myself, how am I serving this situation, this person? And how am I qualified is, I feel like in a certain way, life qualifies us for certain things. And if we're open-minded, and if we are kind of present in this moment, then this is, at least to me, the greatest qualification somebody can have, when it is that aliveness, that person who's in the flow, in the life flow, I would say. And I'm qualified in that sense that am going in and out of that flow, kind of like surfing. It's not like I'm constantly on a high, but I'm still very, I would say my capability of coming back into that flow and coming back into these higher states of mental and emotional well-being is something that I feel is similarly applicable as an athlete whose pulse is going down rapidly because he's so good in shape. That's a little bit like being in challenging situations and how quickly can we come back to our normal or even elevated state of mind. I would say that's qualifying to me. Someone is present and connected with their inner self during the day, most of the time.
So when you were in the third grade, when you were young, what did you envision in your life? What did you want to be when you grew up?
Yeah, I just felt the answer for a third grader was probably not the right. I forgot that you mentioned it was a third grader, but I wanted to be a comedian when I was in elementary school. I really resonate. I watched a lot of Eddie Murphy movies at the time. I was growing up in. I was born in '84, so I grew up in the kind of like childhood, being in the early '90s. In third grade, and so all these comedians that were big at the time were really influential. But I mean, it didn't come to that. But in a sense, I still really resonate with a lot of the comedians. Jim Carrey, for example, I love him. So that was something that I wanted to be when I was in third grade.
You know, what's interesting about you saying that is that, you know, when people probe and think about the world of comedians, you know, a lot of comedians they deal with the hurt of the world through comedy, you know, and I think a lot of that was brought to light with Robin Williams. And it's interesting because I think through the comedy, a lot of comedians are trying to get on a spiritual quest to figure out more meaning in this life. Do you find kind of a parallel with the way that you're living your life now and initially wanting to get into comedy?
Yeah, I would say it's probably, I had a really funny phase in my teenage years, I would say. I would really kind of like testing borders and limits in the sense of conventions and all these things. And I became a little, kind of like a little square in a sense. But now I'm integrating this because it's such a fun way of being. But it's and I know I didn't answer your question completely, but I just wanted to say that it's that integration of this comedic sense, but also that deep spiritual and connectedness, that it's all there. And yes, I feel that comedians, at least I think Will Smith said it in his autobiography, that for him it was like being that, impersonating that comedic person is a way to make people happy and to kind of like change the mood in the room, to kind of like switch that. And I feel a lot of comedians probably struggled with their inner and outer worlds in a sense, and learned to use comedy as that maybe transformational element.
With all of that in mind, when you look at your life right now, are you happy with how everything turned out? I mean, you wanted to obviously get into comedy, but with like hindsight's 2020, when you look at your life now and what you're doing, are you happy with how everything turned out?
Yeah, I mean, we're probably always looking for more. That's a pretty broad generalization, but of course there's things that I wanted to implement in my life, achieve in my life that haven't come to pass yet. But the way it is right now, I would say it is that little bit detachment from what I think needs to come out of my life, to just give it a little kind of like pass it over, or to just be here and to follow the flow without trying to get into one direction. And I know this is difficult to explain, but it's just like It feels just following the flow and where like something is waiting for me rather than I want to be at a certain place at a certain time. And so that capability of just going with the flow and still holding my intention with my business and also with the sanctuary I want to build, to play with that and be a little bit more playful with life rather than being too focused and kind of like strict with all the things and controlling every parameter. So yes, I'm happy and think this is not where I thought I would be, but it's still a beautiful place to be at right now.
You know, everything we become as an adult has some level of beginning, seeds that are planted in the earth. Go back to your childhood and tell me a little bit about what these seeds were for you that gave you this deep desire for spiritual connection and who you've actually ultimately became.
So I would say my seeds have probably been a lot of suffering, a lot of inner turbulence, feeling like a foreign element or like someone who's not from here. Like I oftentimes perceive people who are just so much fun in the university, for example. That's the time when most people party a lot and are really happy, and I was just a lot of the time I was miserable. So my search for meaning and spirituality was that sense of becoming lighter through the work that I did, through the shamanic journeys, but also by listening to the teachers that I mentioned, that it gave me some sense of perspective, but also connection in that I hadn't found before. So I would say that the suffering in combination with feeling a little bit lost in this world as what interests me and what motivates me and what am I struggling with, that was answered on the spiritual path, and that's why I feel content right now, because I'm not fighting myself or my external elements to that degree that I used to do that.
So who would you consider a hero or a role model for you?
A hero is a difficult word, but role models are definitely the spiritual teachers that I listen to, and there's many. So, but out of that, I would probably pick Dr. Wayne Dyer, because he's been a person that had a very earthly life, in the sense that he had a family and he has many children, and he's devoted his life to teaching others in that sense. And so I feel he really was able to balance the spiritual and the material quite well, and that's how I see that is something that I feel drawn towards, to being able of walking this narrow path, or the middle path, the middle way.
Is there anybody that's alive on the planet right now that you would love to meet and talk to?
Absolutely. I mean, there are so many, but thank you for asking that question. I love to ask that question myself, but I would love to hang out with Jim Carrey or Dave Grohl from the Foo Fighters, and Eckhart Tolle. I mean, I went to a retreat on Maui some weeks ago, and I saw him, but I didn't hang out with him and didn't speak with him. So these were some people I would really love to hang out with.
I love that answer. I always find Jim Carrey, I'm actually a visual artist as well, and I know that Jim's branched out in it. His depth, I think it's hard for people to ingest. I think there's a level of him that goes way beyond the surface, and the beauty. And Dave Grohl is just, he's a wonderful human being. I remember years ago I went to a music festival in Kansas City. This was a long time ago, before he got really big. It was when the Foo Fighters were just kind of starting to take off. Mm-hmm. And he was walking through the crowd, and he was like feet from me, and he had his guitar, and he was just playing, and he's just always been one of those guys. In fact, at one point, I watched the documentary on Nirvana about their, kind of, I think it was profiling Kurt Cobain, but but he was in there, Dave was in there, and he was at the point where he was going to quit music. He was like, I can't do this anymore. It was just too much watching what happened to Kurt and everything that happened. And he said that he was in a remote village in, man, it could have been Africa. It was like way, way, way out, like where pop culture did not exist. And he's driving down the road and he sees a young person with a Nirvana t-shirt on, and the light bulb went off and it changed it. He said, I got to keep doing it. So I always remember that story. It was amazing. And he's a very, like Jim, he's a very deep cat. So I love that answer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about, throughout our lives, we accumulate wisdom and knowledge. And I'm curious, if you had a dream tonight, you would run into your 20-year-old version, and you could impart wisdom on that version of you. What would you tell your young version based on what you've lived through your life up to this point?
That's such a difficult question because we are the people we are because of the things that we went through, right? And so I feel I'd probably just go with the things that I did, only that I needed a little bit more time to really trust them. And I used to say follow your heart, and I still go with that because I feel sometimes when we don't know where to go, when we're kind of like a little bit in the midst of things and we're a little bit struggling with where to go, I feel to establish a connection with the heart and to follow that and to listen to that. In Paulo Coelho's Alchemist, that's also a beautiful part of the story where he learns to listen to his heart. And followed by that, I would just say, don't take things personally in a sense that what people say, or don't try to make other people happy in what you do. Just like listen to your heart. What is it I want to do, and how can I bring value and benefits kind of like through that, That would be probably what I would come up with.
I think the one thing that was interesting about the pandemic is that we all really, I think, dug into art, whether it was movies, TV, books. There was all of these venues of art that were very important for us to get through this. And obviously in this modern day and era, it's easy and accessible. But when you were growing up, what was the art for you? What was the music? I know you had comedy, but was there a particular book or was there music that really inspired you that you kind of reverberate and come back to in your life?
So I did. I have been a musician, even though I wanted to be a comedian. I kind of like became a musician, kind of like a hobby musician, and so I oftentimes went to music and to making music. And the music that I went to has changed because I, as a person, have changed. It has been really kind of like melancholic and sad, a lot of sad music, because music was my way of feeling emotions, in a sense, because I couldn't really didn't have that access to my own emotions. So sad music was helping me to feel sad, in a sense. And but it changed. And so I would say that there is not a band or a CD that I have been listening to, but it's always been a great inspiration for me, but also doing a lot of the music, kind of like facilitating that emotion that came later, to just funnel that energy into the musical creation process, and then to use that in a sense and listen to that and work with that.
Oh, yeah, I do. So what has been one of the best client responses, fan letters, so to speak, you've ever gotten back from somebody based on the work you've done?
I think I just recently finished a 16-week program with one client, and he was not familiar with any of the shamanic journeys or the teachings that we had been working with. So he was coming from a different spiritual context, and he was blown away by the power of that transformation because he had been kind of like empowering himself and working with his subconscious and through his shamanic journeys has been gotten access and transformation through things that he wasn't expecting. And I think that was something that really was beautiful to see, how someone with the goal of relating better to their spouse or their partner and being more in touch with their emotions, how that was facilitated through the shamanic journey and through that program, and he was really happy afterwards. So that was something that and I really enjoyed the journey with him. The 16 weeks were really very, very beautiful, and that has been something that has been a win-win situation for us both, because we really enjoyed the time, and he created the intention that he started out with.
So everyone out there has a perception or idea of who they think you are, your family, your friends, your clients, but ultimately you're the one in charge of your life. You're living it. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Who do I think I am? So that is a good question. I don't think I have an answer. I mean, I have a concept sometimes of myself, but also because I have so many different interests and people that I speak with, and friends and acquaintances and places where I live. I feel that it is it's a more fluid concept, depending on I'm a different person when I live in Hawaii than I am here in Germany, and I also am a different person in Norway. And the same goes with if I'm within my music collective context where I'm creating festivals. I am a different person than when I'm in my coach personality, you know. So I think I cannot really answer that. It's just like beautiful to be able to adapt to whatever circumstances come up, to be able to serve and be present in that instance with whatever it is I'm doing, you know.
The beauty of this question is that even an answer that seemingly seems to be a non-answer is probably a more profound answer. So that's a great answer. And I want to know, before we leave here to get to the good business of your life, if anyone out there wants to know more about you, your services, anything going on in your world, where's the best place for them to go?
So I'm lighttrails.co, light as in light or dark, and trails as in beams of light trails. .co is my website, and that's a good place. Other than that, I will be starting, or I am in the process of creating a lot of shamanic journeys on YouTube, so my profile there is also a good place to look for, lighttrails.co. And other than that, I would just like find me, you know, either through the website or LinkedIn or YouTube. Those are probably the best places to get information and get in touch.
Wonderful, Martin. Thank you for opening up. Thank you for your time. This has been wonderful. Thank you, and have a great 2023.
Thank you very much. Same to you.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, spirituality, and music from around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube or on Spotify. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.